And just like that, another Great British Sewing Bee has come to an end. And hasn't it been an incredible series of sewing and sewists, and a final that ended exactly how I anticipated it would do, with an incredibly technical pattern challenge that really tested their ability to sew some of the trickier things with the cowl neck and the French seams and the spaghetti straps and the working on the bias. Now, I was tempted to make a slip dress with you this morning. However, it is not something I would wear. So what I'm going to do with you instead is, so that I can go over some of the bias cut details, I have grabbed some wonderful satin from my stash and I have quick drafted a skirt which will be cut on the bias. So let's just discuss this made to measure, because let's be fair, that transformation challenge did not pay into who won. Now, the made to measure challenge was a tricky one, trying to find a fine line between producing something that is wearable but that is able to be executed, but that it fulfills a very specific trompe l'oeil brief. It was tricky, and I think Orla fell foul of going too conceptual with it. Now, Yasmin's I thought was phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. I think there were some fit issues with that dress. She'd been struggling with it the whole way along, and I'm pretty sure I saw a pin holding the beautiful net bit onto the dress, but I totally understood why Kaz was our winner. They were some really tricky fabrics with a really tricky design, beautifully executed, and it just looked stunning. She has been phenomenal since week 1. But enough of me talking to you about this. Let's move the camera down and let me show you working on the bias.
So the first thing you've got to do is find the bias, and that's about understanding grain. So your selvage is a great example of your straight grain, and most pattern pieces will run parallel to this, but when we're working on the bias, we're working at a 45-degree angle to this edge. Now, this is not a stretch fabric. If I pull it with the grain, there is no movement at all, but as soon as I pull it on its bias from that 45-degree angle, you will see it stretches hugely, and this is what creates the bias cut drape. I have marked the grain line on this pattern so that you can see I am going to line it up and make sure it is running parallel with my selvage. This is how I can make sure that my pattern piece is correct on the fabric, and then I'm going to pin it well. Now, does anyone else notice they were actually pinning on the sewing bee, which is very unusual to see? And now I'm cutting it without moving my pattern piece, because the minute I pick this up and move it, it's going to distort out of shape. Now, it's very difficult to cut 2 identical pieces out on the bias just because of the way it uses up the fabric, so I'm then just placing my pattern piece back on again to cut out the other half of my skirt. And then we move into French seaming these together. Now, the only reason this is different to a regular seam is it's sewn twice. First time, wrong sides together, well pinned, because these seams are going to stretch away from each other before being trimmed back, flipped the other way, and then sewn again, right sides together.
The real joy of a bias cut garment is that it just drapes beautifully without the need for lots of darts or pleats or anything to really pull it in, because it wants to hug the body. All I've done to finish this off is a little loop of elastic around the top and a little frill just to make it a little bit more me. And that's a wrap on this year's Sewing Bee.